Imagine trying to do something good for your body, like make a high protein smoothie for breakfast or after a workout, only to find your protein powder is full of junk. Heavy metals, artificial sweeteners, and chemicals you can't even pronounce. It is frustrating when you try to do the right thing, but instead you just end up adding to the toxic burden in your body. As someone who cares deeply about what goes into my body, as well as the patients that I work with, I believe that what we consume regularly needs to support our health, not silently sabotage it. That's why I use Puri. Their protein powder is made from clean, high-quality ingredients, and it's third-party tested for heavy metals and contaminants because they don't just say it's pure, they actually prove it. You can find collagen peptides, whey protein, and plant-based options on their website. Check them out at puri.com. That's PUORI.com, and use the code LIFEAFTERIMPACT for a 20% discount on your first order.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about, isolation because it feels, as people just don't get it. People just don't get because they can't see what's going on inside your brain. They can't see the injury like they could if you got a big bad cut or, you had shoulder surgery. But just know, it is an isolating process, but isolation, there's a difference between, isolation and solitude.
Welcome to Life After Impact, the Concussion Recovery Podcast. I'm Dr. Ayla Wolf, and I will be hosting today's episode where we help you navigate the often confusing, frustrating, and overwhelming journey of concussion and brain injury recovery. This podcast is your go-to resource for actionable information, whether you're dealing with a recent concussion, struggling with post-concussion syndrome, or just feeling stuck in your healing process. In each episode, we dive deep into the symptoms, testing, treatments, and neurological insights that can help you move forward with clarity and confidence. We bring you leading experts in the world of brain health, functional neurology, and rehabilitation to share their wisdom and strategies. So if you're feeling lost, hopeless, or like no one understands what you're going through, know that you are not alone. This podcast can be your guide and partner in recovery, helping you build a better life after impact. All right, Dr. Brody Miller, welcome to the Life After Impact podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you. You've got such a fascinating story. You are a best-selling author, you're a researcher, a speaker, and you've developed a really amazing online community for people who have been struggling with traumatic brain injuries. You're doing so much for that community. So thanks for being on the show, and I can't wait to hear your story.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit about how you got your traumatic brain injuries and kind of the different insights that you've had in hindsight, looking back in terms of how that affected your life, but then also how you were able to overcome that and get a PhD in neuroscience and get into all the amazing things you're doing now.
Sure. So I'm very open and transparent about this part of my life because it did put me where I am today. So I'm very grateful for that. But long story short is I was at my hometown, Asheville, North Carolina. And at that time in my life, I was kind of a bit of a train wreck, to be honest. And I was really heavy into drugs and alcohol. I was actually a 6-year dropout senior at that time and kind of was directionless. And so I was doing all kinds of crazy stuff at that time. And I was outside of a nightclub one night. It's called Scully's in Asheville. It's no longer there. And I decided to fight a bouncer. I was blackout drunk in the middle of the street. I don't like to be too graphic, but I have to tell it like it was that I got in a fight with a guy. He was about 350 pounds, about 6'5". And he knocked me out in the middle of the street. And so, unfortunately, news TV stations got a hold of the videotape. Somebody videotaped it, and more than over 100,000 people saw me really at my worst moment. It was like an insult to injury moment. So he knocked me out. My head hit the pavement. I was unconscious for a good 5 to 7 minutes before they got me moving. I went to the hospital that night, and uh, I don't remember much. My memory was really poor at that time, and I just remember kind of sitting and in my dark room, very depressed, very guilty, very shameful. My family had to go through all this with me, and a few years later, it actually got worse because I developed a brain bleed. As you know, they call this a cavernous malformation. It's basically, for the listeners, a benign brain tumor. And when it was leaking blood into the rest of my brain, and it was in the frontal lobe, because I had a seizure, they discovered that. And to make matters worse, I ended up having neurosurgery because they said this is going to fix it. We'll put you on seizure medications. We'll remove this little tiny brain tissue that's about the size of a cranberry in your left frontal lobe, and you're going to be seizure free. So I was like, hooray! Like, this is the fix. I'm going to start feeling better. But no, I continued to have about 3 grand mal seizures a month, and when you have a grand mal seizure, you lose consciousness, you fall, and I was experiencing more concussions. So that didn't really help things. I was on Keppra, I was on Depakote, I was on all kinds of antidepressants, antipsychotic medications. It was really rough because all the side effects, and I developed chronic neuropathy in both of my forearms. So I was really ill. Bad memory loss. My impulsiveness was worse than ever before. It was already pretty high. My I It was like I was a 7-year-old child in an adult's body who just could not stop blurting out words and couldn't stop himself from doing things. And I didn't know why. I thought, am I a bad person? Is kind of like I was in depression. I felt like I was a bad person or a bad human being. But here's where it gets awesome. And here's where the story completely turns around is I was watching a YouTube video with Tom Bilyeu from Impact Theory, and he was talking to Dr. Joe Dispenza. And Dr. Joe is talking about how we have all of these thoughts, and then these thoughts, 60,000 to 70,000 thoughts, and most of them repeat on a day-to-day basis. But luckily, he introduced me to the idea that the brain can change, heal, and adapt, which I call it's neuroplasticity, the fancy way of saying it, or learning, or being able to rewire your brain. And that really blessed me with the gift of hope again. And so things really didn't change overnight, but with time, with meditation, with affirmations, with visualization, with exercise, with nutrition, with all of these little tiny natural tips that you can do to rewire your brain, I started to get better. I started to feel better. And eventually I learned how to learn, which they don't really teach you in school. When you just think about it, it's 2 brain cells making new connections, essentially, like friends. And so I became passionate about learning. I got into speed reading, eventually got back into school, and really kind of powered through in about 7 years, going all the way from transferring my bachelor credits in to my master's, to my doctorate, and then my PhD research, which I did on TBI, and how mindfulness meditation can help people with TBIs heal their brains. And so it's been a long journey, and I recently became an author, and I just kind of I'm amazed at how much change there's been. Sometimes change can be painful. It still is, but it's a beautiful process at the end of the day.
Yeah. Are you still on all those medications, or were you able to take some of those out as you got better? I've been drinking Purity coffee now for over 2 years, and one of the things that I absolutely love about Purity coffee is the fact that they do rigorous testing for mold toxins, pesticides, and heavy metals, which allows me to be able to drink their coffee and rest easy knowing that I am not consuming toxic chemicals, mycotoxins, or possibly heavy metals. I know a lot of our listeners are paying a lot of attention to their health and trying to do everything they can to stay healthy. And if you are a coffee drinker, one of the things that I would recommend is making sure that you're drinking a coffee that isn't putting more toxins into your body. If you would like to try Purity Coffee, you can get 20% off your first order using our promo code LIFEAFTER20 by going to puritycoffee.com and entering that in the promo code box at checkout.
I'm so fortunate to say I'm completely off of medications, and I'm now completely 100% seizure free.
Wow, because I know once people get put on things like Keppra, doctors really want to keep them on that for life. So was that a bit of a
Yeah.
struggle for you, or what was the decision making in that piece of it in terms of the seizures and the seizure medications?
Really, I felt that it exacerbated my symptoms. It didn't stop the seizure frequency at all,
Mm.
and it had these bad side effects. Keppra, I was actually in an alcohol and drug recovery center when I was on Keppra, and it like infuriate. I got infuriated. Like I turned into the Hulk. Like when I was on that, it had weird side effects, and Depakote made me feel like sloggy and tired. And if it wasn't helping me in the first place, I had to be like, Mama, I'm not taking this anymore,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
uh, and luckily I got off of it. And does medication have its time and its place? Yeah, but only I would say for 2 to 5% of the people actually is it going to be helpful for. The rest. I'm very biased, but that's my perspective. That most medications can be very detrimental and actually hurt the nervous system and the brain.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to write my book, was to also present people with non-pharmaceutical options that are out there, because a lot of times, people's doctors aren't really talking about non-pharmaceutical options. I'm always surprised when you start to recognize that a lot of the pharmaceuticals, they don't even fully understand their mechanisms of action. And then it's like they obviously come with their big long list of side effects like you experienced, and it's like you said, there's certainly a place for them. There's a place and there's a time, and for some people they're absolutely life changing, but when they're not working for you, then yeah, time to look at other options.
Yeah, totally. And we all seen those commercials. Like the doctor will be talking, and then all of a sudden it's just this long list of side effects. It comes with death, seizures, and all of these things, and you're just like, huh, I don't know if taking a medication is worth risking death.
Right, but
But
because there are people dancing in the street, you're supposed to pay more attention to them than the side effects.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, seriously. Wow. Well, that's awesome. You were able to get off of those meds, and I've heard from a number of people who have had kind of like a lack of interest in school and in learning, and then once they really just get interested in a topic, then all of a sudden they find that joy in learning. And it sounds like you really did. Like you found the thing that was very interesting for you, which was, how do I heal my own brain? And that
Mhm.
allowed you to actually like put in the 7 years of work. That's incredible.
Yeah. I think that it showed me what my passion was. I didn't even know my passion found me. Really
Mm.
is just the magnificence of what's actually going on in between. Our 2 years. I was just like, I can learn about this endlessly, and the things are changing every single day. The most magnificent piece of architecture in the entire universe, perhaps, right here in between our 2 years.
Yep, absolutely. Have you met Joe Dispenza in person?
I've met him. We haven't had like a long conversation, but I have met him, and he seems he's an inspirational guy because of what happened with him and his spine. being able to regenerate that. And he's been able to influence so many people in a positive way. And I really respect that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had downloaded one of his meditation apps once, and it was so funny because every time I'd start listening to it, I'd start laughing because it starts out with him being like, "Sit up straight," and it's like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
oh, okay, here we go."
Yeah, it's kind of like a drill sergeant in a way, you know?
Exactly. That's how it felt.
Yeah.
Yep. You wrote your book. Tell me a little bit about, the process of writing that. Did you start writing it when you were still in school or when you were working on your PhD? Did you think you would write a book or how did that develop?
I always knew that while it was all transpiring that I wanted to write a book, I always knew I just didn't know what it was going to be about. And I think brain injury research and all of that chose me. It's really funny because I finished my PhD and then I really wanted to help people with stress. But then, like, things happen and they're like, why don't you do brain injuries? Why don't you focus on that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, am I really passionate about that? But long story short, I ended up getting back into brain injury and concussion research. And the book was hard to write because you really have to sit down and be focused and really kind of make it digestible as possible. And that's really what I wanted it to be, was just a book for me at that stage in my life when I didn't really have that hope. And so everything that I wrote was just like to an old version of me who could have really have used that and the tools. And I tried to make it as digestible and relatable as I possibly could, kind of taking out the medical speak and making it to where anybody that, a loved one could use it, somebody who's actually struggling with brain injury symptoms could use it, or just somebody who wants to educate themselves more on the topic.
Yeah, well, I think you accomplished that goal. It's very readable, and it totally reminded me of probably 15 years ago. There was I'm forgetting his name, but there was a guy who used to he was writing the punk rock versions of Buddhism and making Buddhism really accessible from this,
Yeah.
alt rock perspective. And I was reading your book, and I'm like, this is the alt rock version of neuroscience right here.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I tried to be as transparent as I possibly could. And, unfortunately, I think doctors get this kind of God complex sometimes. I don't know if it happens subconsciously or what, but, we're all human beings here, and we all, have feelings, emotions, doubts, aspirations and goals. And, I just wanted it to be, I talk about the brain, but I tried to write it from the heart, basically.
Yeah, your book is called Brain Rescue, a 90-day blueprint to reclaim your memory after a brain injury or concussion. Are you doing any consulting right now or outside of writing your book? It sounds like your goal was really to give people, again, these little digestible things that they can do on a daily basis to really try to improve brain function.
Right now, I'm helping people in group settings as well as one-on-one. Um, and I've worked with people all across the spectrum. I've worked with boxers who are concerned with neuroprotection and the long-term effects of combat sports on the brain, all the way down to people with very, very severe cases like diffuse axonal injury, which is a tough one. And so really, my ultimate goal is to educate and then help them, give them the tools that they need. Because I really think that the brain, and I know that you'll appreciate this analogy, is it's kind of like a big house that got hit with a tornado or got hit with a hurricane or even multiple tornadoes. And so what do you need to do? You need to slowly rebuild that step by step. And you're going to need an architect, which is you. You're the CEO of your own life. You're going to need tools and supplies, and that's going to be the nutrition and the hydration and the supplements. But you're also going to need those dedicated workers, which I think are like the brain retraining exercises that we all can learn to rewire our brain. Does it happen in one night? Usually not. It takes time, energy, and resources and belief. a plan is how I see things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I went into my doctorate program fully in the throes of post-concussion syndrome. And I felt like it took me 5 times as long to, do the work that I was assigned. But within as the years passed, I could look back and say like, wow, I mean, what I'm doing now is 100 times easier than it was, 3 years ago. And so I really feel like that speaks to the power of learning new things. And like you said, creating the new synapses and building those connections. And it might feel hard and challenging, but really forcing the brain to learn new information, I think, is one of the most powerful ways that we can help the brain to work better. Um, I used to not have very good auditory, like I feel like my auditory learning was weak compared to my kinesthetic learning. If you show
Mm-hmm.
me how to do something, I got it, right? But
Yeah.
if I have to listen to somebody explain something, that wasn't very good. But then podcasting came around, and all of a sudden I was like listening to podcasts every day. And just by doing that, and then I'm one of those obnoxious people that's like, okay, so I was listening to this podcast and then, and, but what that was doing was, my brain was learning new information from an auditory angle and then remembering it and then repeating it to somebody else. And by repeating it to somebody else, I was continuing to memorize it. Right. And so I developed the ability to learn more using my auditory system as opposed to my kinesthetic. And so it's like I can look back in hindsight and recognize how different learning strategies have helped me over time.
That's so fascinating because it's some of the things I'm so passionate about is like why do we not treat the brain like the body? If we go to the gym and we'll do our squats, we'll do our have leg day, chest day, but why with the brain did we suddenly think it's different to where okay, well I'll listen to a podcast and that's going to rewire a different section of the brain and a different functionality of the brain. Okay, I'm visual, the same thing, and it's like a full brain exercise. And I think it just makes sense that gives better results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. What are some of your favorite exercises as far as things that you do? It sounds like meditation is a big one.
Yeah, I love meditation, and one of my favorites is just different styles of breathing. One of my favorites is nitric oxide breathing, which is just through the nose because our nasal cavities have a very high concentration of nitric oxide. It's kind of obnoxious, but it's like, or you can call ujjayi breathing is another one, which is like the yogis have been doing centuries. It just kind of sounds like this, like. I mean, your dog will even do that if you have a dog. Like, he's always going, but it like brings this inner heat and like it strengthens neural pathways. It's boosting oxygen and blood flow. Just like this simple thing. Who would have thought breathing was good for you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all the different ways that you can breathe, and whether it's through your mouth or through your nose, or how long you hold it, how long you exhale. It's very powerful.
It is. I think it's one of the fastest ways of like really changing the brain and boosting neuroplasticity. The breath holds and the inhalations, these simple God-given tools that we've been given.
Right, that are free.
They're free, yeah.
Awesome. What else do you do on a daily basis, just to kind of keep your brain healthy at this point?
There's a lot of different things. I fell in love with juggling. And just because I heard how it's helpful for so many different neural pathways, like communication between the left and right brain and your motor functioning. And it's just a fun activity. I get relaxed and I just start to juggle, and it's just a fun thing you can do. And of course, exercise, of course, hydration and movement, weightlifting and eating healthy. I also teach people these little tiny finger movements that they can make. I call them mind gym exercises. And basically all you're doing is stimulating the motor cortex of your brain. And it looks easy, but really it's kind of hard. And it's just a simple trick you can do to activate neuroplasticity in your brain and really just also kids love it too. It's a fun exercise that we all can do and just have fun with. So I think learning is also should be fun.
Yeah, I think I saw an Instagram video where you were making a triangle with one hand and a square with the other hand. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot do that. I was
Yeah,
trying to do it. I was like, oh boy, I got to practice this one.
yeah, totally. It's just all with practice. You can get better at like literally anything under the sun. Within some circumstances, because some people are going to love math and they're going to love logic and all of these things. Some people really aren't. So I mean, really find the things that are good for you that you enjoy doing.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to have some kind of amount of interest in it. Otherwise, it just feels you dread doing it and then you won't do it. It's kind of the same thing with exercise.
Eventually.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard as a
Yeah.
clinician. You want to encourage people to exercise. And then you have those people who are like, I have zero interest in exercising. And it's like, well, that's going to make it really hard. But it's like if you can find something that allows you to move your body that you're interested in,
Right.
obviously very
Yeah.
helpful.
Movement. Yeah. Movement. Like we were made to move. We were made to move. And um, when you're stagnated and sitting at a desk and scrolling social media and eating fried chicken and, bad foods and stuff like that, no wonder, we weren't built for that. We were built to be out in nature and exploring and adventure and hunting for food and challenging ourselves. So no wonder depression is really high these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you said you live in Colorado, so you've got access to some of the best outdoors around.
Yeah, yeah, I'm lucky for that for sure. Not everybody is so lucky to be, but like do your best to your current situation. Like even if you're in New York City or something, make sure that you're going to the park or make sure you take a drive on the weekends to get away from the city and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. I think being out in nature is so important. Even from a visual perspective, I think people's whole physiology changes when they're able to kind of take in a scenery and they're actually focusing on more of like divergence type eye movements. They're not just staring at a computer screen, but they're actually looking off in the distance and seeing three dimensional. And I'm very lucky. I live out in the country, and like right now at nighttime, in my backyard, the lightning bugs are all over. And so it's
Oh
like you
yeah,
kind of like see the lightning bugs in the grass and then the field and then deep into the forest. And it's almost like, wow, like you just have this crazy amount of depth perception that's being like illuminated with lightning bugs. I love it.
that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up with lightning bugs in where I'm from in North Carolina, and they're beautiful. Nature is beautiful.
Yeah. And my dog likes to chase them. So. Oh, awesome. So tell me about the classes that you have or the communities. What does that structure look like?
Yeah, I have what I call is the rebound recovery community, and we meet every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I just go over tiny steps either from the rebound method or like an adjunct to that, something that they can add on to that. Just these tiny bite-sized lessons. We breathe together, we meditate. We'll talk about things that are going on that are hard and things that we're overcoming. But ultimately, I just want to build an uplifting community where we all can pick one up instead of putting each other down. Like we're uplifting and helping one another get up. And some of these people that I work with are, just some of the most amazing, resilient people I've ever met in my entire life. So that's a gift.
Yeah, incredible. And then you also have a podcast, or you said it's more of a YouTube channel. And you've been doing that for a couple of years.
Yeah, so you can find it. Dr. Brody Miller is my YouTube channel, Dr. Brody Miller. But I also have the Rebound Your Brain podcast on Spotify. Like I told you, I need to get on that and transfer the audio files into Spotify.
Gotcha. You need
Yeah,
some technical assistance.
totally,
Someone to do that
totally.
for you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'll put all that in the show notes. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? I know that with the work that you do, that the emotional and the psychological effects of concussions and TBI are near and dear to your heart. And it sounds like with your community, you're really focusing on that piece of it.
hmm I want to talk about, isolation because it feels, as people just don't get it. People just don't get because they can't see what's going on inside your brain. They can't see the injury like they could if you got a big bad cut or, you had shoulder surgery. But just know, like, it is an isolating process, but isolation, there's a difference between, isolation and solitude. And that really hit home for me recently. Is isolation is like feeling like, you're it's a brutal, painful feeling, but I think it actually gives the opportunity for solitude, which is coming back inside and getting in connection with your body, getting back in connection with your mind and your heartbeat. Solitude is like going into that internal universe, of this amazing body that we've been gifted with, and finding really who you are and digging deep. So I think that's something I just want people to know that may feel isolated, is it is an opportunity to redirect your life, and come back better and sharper than ever before.
Yeah, I think for me, one of those life lessons was rather than constantly trying to like look outside of myself to figure out what am I missing, it was really more about recognizing like how do I become my own solar battery, right? Like how do I just help to like recharge myself so that I'm this self-sufficient whole being that doesn't feel
Mhm.
like they have to constantly be like searching for something to make me whole. And that mind shift was so helpful in like, how do I just become my own solar battery? What do I need to do, to just feel good in the moment?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like finding that peace and that presence now, because it is there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I know you had mentioned when you were going through all this that you didn't have good impulse control, and then you also kind of like felt, "Am I a bad person because of that?" And it's I think one of the things that people do really struggle with is that understanding of when the frontal lobe is impacted by a concussion. Well, all of a sudden, the part of the brain that inhibits your emotions isn't firing on all cylinders, and so now all of a sudden your limbic system gets to be in control and in the driver's seat. And for some people, that's such a hard thing to even understand. And I think that that educational piece is so important because once people do understand what's happening, well, then they don't blame themselves, right? They're not kind of like turning that on themselves. But then also they can start to recognize, okay, well, if I start to actually work on the cognitive piece and kind of bring more energy and activity to the frontal lobe and strengthen that prefrontal cortex, well, then it can start to do its job of inhibiting the limbic system and kind of rebalancing that whole connectivity.
Yeah, exactly. And that was my quote unquote get out of jail free card. Was like, oh wow, I'm not a bad person. This is a brain health issue, and not only that, it can change and get better than it ever was before if you put the time and energy into facilitating that.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And do you spend a lot of time kind of helping people figure that piece out in terms of making that connection and what kinds of kind of cognitive games and exercises they can do to just help bring more to that prefrontal cortex so that it can work better and they feel more in control of their emotions? And do you see that working with the community that you have?
Absolutely. I think that that's one of the most empowering things that we can do because the front, as I knew that so well on such a deep level, because that was my issue. So if I just teach people the same things that work for me, it's just replicable to some extent that you just have to boost blood flow. It's all a game of blood flow and oxygenation. Get, imagine, visualization, all of these things that the frontal lobe is known for. And I mean, it improves your decision making, improves your focus, your concentration, your inhibition ability to inhibit behavior and stop. So it's about what we do, but also the things that we stop doing in our lives that are so important.
Yeah. And I think having that self-compassion piece is so important too, in terms of, I hear people report to me that every time they forget something, or maybe they have a moment of where they just kind of aren't in control of their emotions and they yell at their kid or whatever, that they immediately start
Yeah.
beating themselves up. And or they say, oh, well, that's my brain injury. So that's just another sign that I'm still broken. I am not healing.
Right.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
that, for me, I had to really just stop that self-talk. And so now, the reality is I have 100,000 things happening in my life. I'm spread super thin. I work 7 days a week. And so, yes,
Mm-hmm.
I am forgetful and I do make mistakes, but I don't use that as an opportunity to say, oh, well, my brain is injured, or I don't use it even as an excuse. If
Mm-hmm.
anything, it's more of a reminder of, hey, maybe you need to slow down. Maybe you need to have better systems in place. Maybe you need to not be spread so thin. But I use it more like I'm so much more compassionate than I used to be towards myself. I'm not saying, oh, well, I misplaced my wallet again because, oh, look, I'm still concussed. It's like I don't even use that language anymore because I don't think it's helpful to beat myself up or to try to constantly have it serve as a reminder of the fact that I've had concussions. It's more of just okay, let's be nice to ourselves and figure out how to do it better the next time.
Yeah, that's such a relevant and important point. Is like we talk to ourselves like we're our own worst enemies. We're so self-critical, and that is another thing that you can change and rewire your own self-talk. And I always make this analogy. Would you say those same thing persons to somebody out if you were in the middle of the street? No, you wouldn't say those things that you're saying to yourself. So why do you say them to your best friend yourself? Like, why would you do that? So know that that icky voice in your mind. You can calm it down and you can change it. I mean, at first, just starts with being aware of what you're saying. If you need to journal out those negative things that you say, because they really can make or break your recovery.
Yeah, somebody once said to me, they're like, well, if you wouldn't say it to a 5-year-old, you shouldn't say it to yourself. That was like a really stark, like, oh, yeah, if I wouldn't talk to a 5-year-old this way, then I shouldn't talk to myself that same way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another great way of thinking about that.
For me, too, I often pay attention with my patients on trying to touch in to that concept of like, what is your self-talk? What are you telling yourself? And if people are beating themselves up all the time, I think it's important to know that and to address that for sure.
Yeah, and I mean it is an ongoing battle too. Like I still struggle sometimes with being too harsh on myself and too critical on myself. But I know it. I know now it's a journey, that it's not a destination. It's always going to be something that's there and something I constantly want to try to improve. And listening to tapes has been very helpful for me. Like listening to they call them subconscious mind reprogramming tapes that you listen to, and believe it or not, it does change like that inner voice.
Yeah. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you wanted to touch on today?
Yeah, maybe we can really quickly like jump into like epilepsy. That's another uh, passion of mine, like helping people. I'd love to talk about it just because I I think that a lot of seizures are caused from this incoherent signal, basically. I really equate it all down to, at least for me in my own seizure recovery, is there's this electrical signal that happens that's disrupted, whether it's a brain leak or whether it's just miscommunication between the brain. And I just believe that if you continuously, quote unquote, interrupt that signal, that signal can change over time into something that's more coherent and peaceful. And so I just I think my second book perhaps may be on seizure recovery and a natural way to do so, because it just is so devastating. I think everybody can relate to a panic attack. Is that's what a seizure feels like? Is like all your walls are closing in. It feels like this big sense of doom that all your walls are closing in, and your body's about to take control. But just know, like, a panic attack can be changed. Seizures can improve in the frequency and intensity, just like a panic attack in some ways.
How many years have you been seizure free at this point?
Going on a year and a half, and that's the longest it's ever been for me. So by far, so it's a miracle to me, honestly.
Mm-hmm. And did you use CBD as part of that at all?
I did use CBD, and I think it was helpful. But I'd say the most impactful thing for me is a vagus nerve stimulator that I started to use about 2 years ago, and it's been incredibly helpful because I was on that pathway of becoming seizure free, but it did just keep happening, and I think that was like the tip of the iceberg that kind of helped me get past all of it.
Which one do you use?
It's called a Truvaga, Truvaga. I met the CEO of the company. His name's JP Erico, and just such a brilliant and gifted guy, and helpful guy. And I'm not affiliated with him. I just I've had such amazing results myself that I just want to shout it from the rooftop, kind of thing.
Yeah, amazing. I do,
Yeah.
And that is a transcutaneous one, like you hold it to your neck?
Yeah, so it's non-invasive stimulation.
Yeah, excellent. That's incredible. I love that they're coming out more with these non-invasive, non-surgically implanted devices that people can try before just immediately jumping to some kind of invasive surgical device.
Yeah, I'm all for that. I think that our body and our mind have the natural ability to heal, change, and adapt. Sometimes we just have to find the way of facilitating that and helping it do what it was designed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Totally. It was awesome to be here.
Medical disclaimer. This video or podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and materials included is at the user's own risk. The content of this video or podcast is not intended to be a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and consumers of this information should seek the advice of a medical professional for any and all health-related issues. A link to our full medical disclaimer is available in the notes.